Thank you for having me. I've been interested as much as I've been able to hear of the presenters talking about the use of renewable energies on active mines. One of the things that my presentation will focus on is what happens post mining activities on the land. And our Highland Wind facility in Pennsylvania gives, I think, a pretty good overview. So a little bit about EverPower. We were founded back in 2002. We have 752 operating megawatts, 4 in Pennsylvania, 1 in New York, 1 in California, and 1 in Illinois. We employ several different technologies across those, across our fleet in terms of turbine manufacturers. But the company is a growing company, and one of the areas that we've always embraced is, looking at mine spoils, especially in southwestern Pennsylvania, as an opportunity for development. So a little something about the wind farm. It is located, for those of you that aren't familiar with Pennsylvania, it's in the southwestern corner of Pennsylvania. It is along the Allegheny Front, which enjoys a lot of elevation and ridge lines. It makes for a pretty windy site, a pretty windy area. There's quite a bit of development all over Pennsylvania in that area. You can see the environmental benefits of the project in terms of it's been operating since 2009, and it's a 62.5 megawatt project. The Pennsylvania has a very rich energy history. It's actually, for those of you that are at all familiar with shale gas, the Marcellus Shale, that's one of the main locations that they're drilling, again, in southwestern Pennsylvania. There was historical oil drilling. We are home to several nuclear plants there. So it really does have a rich energy history and a diversified energy history. Coal, natural gas, wind, some solar, although solar does not have the same type of penetration that we do in wind in Pennsylvania. So this is really what presents the opportunity for development in the state of Pennsylvania and beyond in the U.S. is what do we do once these surface mines are abandoned and no longer used, and what can be repurposed on that land. When we found the Highland Wind site, we found a site that was largely unused by anyone. The landowners were paying taxes on the land, but hadn't received revenue from the surface mining in quite some time. And so really, the land was just left as it stood, pretty barren. And there are a lot of trouble, a lot of health and environmental problems that are caused by some of those abandoned mines. Some of them, when they were abandoned, and including the site of our project, there was machines rotting on the site, just rusting away. There were old mine spoils. There were just a lot of environmentally challenging things about the site, but that's the way the mining industry at that time in Pennsylvania, they just kind of left the site and moved on to a new one. So in Pennsylvania, there is a great deal of benefits from reclaiming these sites. So again, the DEP in Pennsylvania is, 133,000 acres were pre-1977. So again, as I mentioned, these lands didn't need to have a lot of reclamation done to them by law. They just were kind of abandoned. Machinery, as I mentioned, rusting on them. No real trees planted, just nothing. So what Pennsylvania has tried to do is revitalize these areas. There's quite a few of them. The budget isn't always there to help them, but Renewables offers a great opportunity for future development. These lands are generally remote, which helps when you're developing a wind or solar project. You don't have the not in my backyard issues associated with sometimes associated with wind power development. Now, the issues, however, as I mentioned, here's the, what is the strip mining? It's surface mining. I don't need to tell you guys what strip mining is. But let me get to some of the challenges on the site. Because the surface was left largely untouched, they did put some topsoil, they did put some shale back on the ground. We needed to do quite a bit of stabilization to the land in order to make it stable for a wind turbine base. Modern wind turbine bases, we use what's generally referred to as a spread footer. The base doesn't actually go very deep. At its deepest point, it could be 12, 15, 20 feet deep. So it's not a very deep base, but it is a very wide base. And we had to use a process called deep dynamic compaction. Essentially, we just dropped the weight that you see in the background. Whoops, I'm sorry. That you see in the background up and down until the soil was compacted. It took quite a bit of time. It was more expensive than a normal foundation, but it was necessary to get the site ready. However, the site had some positives. It was definitely remote. We didn't have a lot of people living around the site, so it was a very popular place to develop. And it enjoyed access to transmission as well as very good wind speed. So you can see the foundation there. The foundation was 530 cubic yards of concrete, and that was done in one continuous pour. So it's a pretty big foundation after it was left. We, of course, do testing on the foundation just to make sure, and we monitor it. We've had no issues. It looks like as though the deep dynamic compaction did the job that it was supposed to do. So I guess we want to get into, well, why develop these projects? The community benefit from these projects is pretty measurable in these small communities. And you see here we have some facts about the wind farm. We do have, let me get you one more slide. So we pay about $4.5 million in taxes over the life of the project to the local communities. These are small rural communities. That's really a lifeblood to them. We contribute to local schools, and we also employ a lot of locals, both in the construction of the project as well as the operation of the project. Throughout the lifetime, we buy a lot of local goods and services, which amounts, again, to several $1 million over the life of the project. It's funny, during the construction of the project as well as the operation, our operators got the key to the local gas station so that they could fill up their trucks because they were using it so much and getting so much gas that the local operator didn't like to work those long hours. So, we really have ingrained ourselves into the community, and it's really helped. So the opportunities in reclaiming these mine sites are great. The challenges still exist, however. It is more expensive to build on one of these sites. You do, in the States, you do bring up issues of cleanup and liability for cleanup, which definitely can add cost to a site. But the remote nature of these projects and sometimes the surface area that you're dealing with is quite good for both a wind farm, and the other opportunity that I haven't mentioned is solar. You have large swaths of land that, for solar can be stabilized a lot easier. You're not building the big infrastructure that you would on for a wind turbine. So you really do have a large swath of land that you wouldn't necessarily have in developing in other areas. So that presents a real opportunity going forward to see, what could do it, what could be possible. And we actually, we built a second phase onto the project, our Highland North Wind Farm. That was on, about 14 of those turbines were also on reclaimed strip mines. Same issues with deep dynamic compaction, but, given the amount of space in a state, just in a state like Pennsylvania, where you have energy being produced on what was land that just isn't being used for anything else, it really does present an opportunity for us as developers to find good land with either good wind resource or, in the case of solar, just a good big field to put it in and access to transmission. So that's really, I just wanted to kind of talk about the opportunities in abandoned mines and going forward, and perhaps even in mines. I know that you are all speaking about power use on your active mines, but it does represent an opportunity for developers like mine to come into those lands that aren't currently being used or that are out of production, as it were, moving forward. It's always bad to go before lunch because I'm worried if people are just going to not ask questions so that they can go out and have a bite or not. So, but I can open it up to questions if anyone has any. Right there.
Two questions. Firstly, what's the revenue stream? Is it the cost for EPA? And are you reconnected?
Are we? The second part was the. Yeah. So the questions were, what's the revenue stream? In the case of the original project, we do have a typical power purchase agreement. That is with First Energy, large utility. And the second part of the question is, are we grid connected? Yes. We happen to have access to transmission, which is obviously a large part of being able to build the wind farm. But there was existing transmission running right through the site. So we are, again, this may be an opportunity for your mine areas, once they are done, to get a third source of revenue or second source of revenue, leasing that land for solar development or for wind development definitely is an opportunity. The companies that own this land, as I mentioned, there were some families and some old coal companies. They were just paying taxes on the land, so they were happy to have a development there. They weren't ever going to do anything else. It's not like you're going to build homes on it or something like that. So.
Are you able to mention any more about the possibility of marrying up with a solar development on some of these properties?
Yeah, we actually, to be quite honest, we would have built probably as much as 10 megawatts of solar on land that we actually own for the Highland Wind Farm site. The market's just simply not there. We have access to transmission. We have available space at our substation. Unfortunately, the market in Pennsylvania just isn't there. There's no feed-in tariffs or anything like that. But it sits ready to be developed whenever we can. The cost of solar, I'm sure it was discussed quite a bit, has come down so low, but unfortunately in Pennsylvania and in PJM, that market is just not quite there. Great, thank you.